All right, Sean McGuire, you heard that fantastic tease I gave you.
Yeah, that was quite the tease.
I
Yep.
mean, I guess you caught up with a coach who coached
Yep.
potentially a couple of Patriots draft picks here. We'll see. We know their prospects. Tell us all about it.
Yep. Yeah, so I interviewed Missouri head football coach Eli Drinkwitz, which I just want to stop and kind of stop there. That's got to be on the all name team.
Absolutely.
I don't know if there's a coach's all name team, but
Yeah.
Eli Drinkwitz certainly has to be on it.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so I talked with him about Armand Membou as well as Luther Burden. Both of them are probably first round picks. Membou is definitely in consideration for the Patriots at number 4. A lot of these draft experts have him as a top tackle in the class, especially after he lit the world on fire during the NFL Scouting Combine. So it was really great to talk to Drinkwitz about him. And I think, and I'll kind of just, before we get into anything else, I think the biggest takeaway that I had and the biggest question that I had for Coach was, do you think he could transition from playing right tackle to playing left tackle? Because that's, from a Patriots perspective, that's what they need. And Membou played strictly right tackle when he was at Missouri. And the coach said, he is confident that he could. And it comes down to, power and athleticism. He said those were his Membou's 2 biggest strengths. And he said, pretty much he thinks he could play anywhere. He could play guard, he could play either tackle position, and called him a rare specimen. So I thought that was, really, really great insight.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of these guys on the offensive line in particular coming out of college are moved around a ton of times, and they have to. You almost have to have that sort of versatility, and then you get to the NFL. The NFL can only take what the college game gives them, and I think sometimes people get confused with that. But like the college game is a feeder to the league, so this is what happens. So they come into the league. And maybe every now and again you get a true left tackle all world, but for the most part, most of these guys are interchangeable. And in the NFL, you kind of have to be based on injuries, free agency, trades, all the drama that you and I get paid to talk about. So I'm not against that. I guess my question to you with talking to this coach, a lot of these guys are called by these coaches. And if Vrabel is to pick up the phone and say, why should we draft this kid, what would the pitch be?
Yeah, I more or less asked that exact question. And he just said, his belief in Armand is based on his his ability that he thinks he is so far away from his ceiling. And just the fact that, you got a 20-year-old offensive tackle coming in here that's going to continue to grow and get better. And, his best football is still ahead of him. And with that, he's proven that he's still an elite player in college football. But, just that room to grow is really what stuck out. And I'll just kind of read you a direct quote. My belief would be, if you're the Patriots drafting at the number 4 spot, you want a player who is not only elite, but has room to grow. That's when you draft Hall of Famers. You don't want guys that are tapped out. He clearly has plenty left inside. So that's a quote from the coach right there. And I also will say, he was cross-trained at left tackle. And the Coach Drinkwitz kind of confirmed that, said that they cross-train all those guys. And when I did kind of say, all right, well, why was he staying at right tackle instead of playing left tackle? Understandable explanation. They had a guy, it's essentially where the team needed him, is what Coach said. And they had a guy, Javon Foster, he was a Jaguars 4th-round pick last year. He was a left tackle when Membou started at Missouri. And then when Foster left, Missouri went into the transfer portal, signed who they thought was the best player available. His name is Marcus Bryant. Marcus Bryant was an all ACC or an all AAC first teamer, and he only played left tackle at SMU. So it essentially just it was much more Membou doing what was best for the team and, that sort of thing, as opposed to him not being available or being good enough, to play left tackle.
Now, let's talk about wide receivers here, because Luther Burden III is another player who played at Missouri. And I'm going to tell you something. True story. And I said on Foxborough Rush, you could check the tape. But I told George during the college football season, we were sort of scouting and looking at wide receivers because we know that's an area of need. We knew that way back when. And I told him I liked a kid in Mizzou named Luther Burden III. And he rolled his eyes at me. He's like, he's too small. I'm like, okay, I get it. He's not built like Megatron, but those don't exactly grow on trees. The reason I wanted him is because watching him both in his sophomore and his junior year, dude is just a playmaker. I mean, he can make every play. They really use him a lot like Debo. I saw him, obviously catch slants and go to the house. Bubble screens, go to the house. Reverses, jet sweeps, you name it. They were trying to get him the ball. I saw him returning kicks and punts. This kid is a playmaker no matter where you put him on the field. I mentioned his size, 5'11", 208. So, he's not the biggest cat you've ever seen. His sophomore year, he really jumped out to me, 1,200 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns. Junior year, not as good, but he is a playmaker, and they were a mess in terms of their offense anyway. I can't blame all that on him. And even when I watch Missouri, because it all goes back to betting for me, Measy. I bet on Mizzou a few times this year. The kid was making plays all over the place. What did Coach say about Luther Burden III?
Yeah, and I'll kind of break this into two different parts, because the first part that really stuck out to me was more so like a big picture thing, and then there was also the obvious football traits. But from a big picture standpoint, I really was kind of like surprised or, a little bit with how Coach Drinkwitz really just praised and appreciated how Luther Burden, during the recruitment process, and how Luther Burden essentially had 39 offers. Every college football program in the country wanted him. He was the number 1 wide receiver in the country. He was a 5-star recruit. Everybody wanted him. And, Luther Burden comes in and he's like, well, I want to make a name for myself. I want to, build a legacy in state. And so Drinkwitz really pointed that out and just said, going from essentially having any offer that he wanted and kind of staying at home and doing that really spoke a lot about Burden. And one quote I have right here is, he's absolutely responsible for helping us build this program around and bring in some national recognition into our school and into our football program. He also talked about his willingness to believe in the vision when nobody else would, and, quote, we owe him a big debt of gratitude. So those were some of like the big picture things. And moving into the football side, he just praised how good he is with the ball in his hands. Said he was a mismatch and a tough tackle for corners. He actually, I know George is talking about he doesn't have the size. Coach Drinkwitz thought, his size at 6 foot and 206 pounds, really makes him that mismatch. And he kind of said the same thing that you just alluded to. You can get him the ball in just so many different ways, whether it's out of the backfield, whether it's, jet sweeps and quick slants and all that sort of stuff, because he is such a mismatch to corners. He really, he can get plenty of yards on the ground.
You mentioned how you had a first-round grade on Membou. I wonder with Burden, where do you sort of see him, just in your opinion, where do you sort of see him getting drafted in terms of where in the draft? Like, what round grade do you have on Burden? Because I like his game, but he's obviously not going to be a top pick.
Yeah, I think when you're talking specifically from a Patriots perspective, I think that is where it gets a little curious, I guess, because he's probably too rich at number 4. He is too rich at number 4, but he's most likely not going to be there at 38. So you got these 2 third-rounders, you got an early second-round pick. He might be one of those players, if you go tackle, maybe you go Membou at number 4 or Will Campbell at number 4, and then Burden kind of slips to, late teens, early 20s, and the Patriots come back up and get him at, early 20s. And they give up their second-round pick, they give up a third-rounder, and they walk away with 2 first-rounders. That being offensive tackle and wide receiver, their 2 biggest needs. So I think, that is definitely the question of, where he fits for the Patriots in specifically in regards to the draft board. And I think it would be something like that. He's probably a player that's not going to be there at 38. So if you do like him, you're probably going to have to trade up back into the first round, or at least early second round.
I'm almost thinking in tiers here where, okay, Ted McMillan, we just watched his pro day, ran a 4.4 or 4.5, depending on who clocked it. But regardless, he's fast. And people thought maybe that would be the knock on him. So I unless you're taking him at 4 or trading back to within that top 10, I'm kind of taking him off the board. But at least I'm putting him at that highest tier in terms of what the Patriots could draft at wide receiver. Then it's that next tier where George drives me nuts. He's been talking about this Jaden Higgins kid since forever.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons why is because of the size. George wants a big body Benz. He wants somebody who can, in the red zone, go up and get it. We know Tech can do that, and we believe Jaden Higgins can do it. But then, listen, I think Luther Burden's in that same tier as Higgins. Do you value him more? Do you think because again, I think George and other Patriots fans get caught up in prototype, and I understand who doesn't want a 6'4" wide receiver who runs like who doesn't want Justin Jefferson? Like who doesn't want that? But I do think there's space for a playmaker on an offense that doesn't have one other than your quarterback. Like, I look at Burden, and I get Higgins' size, but I look at Burden as someone who I can plug and play and put him all over the field, and he's making plays. He's almost – is it fair to call him a better version of Pop Douglas? Because I kind of think he could be. Like, am I insane for that? Am I insane to put Burden and Higgins – in the same category in terms of prospect?
Well, to your Pop Douglas point, I mean, if you're going to be drafting him in the first round, early second round, he better be better than Pop Douglas. I think that's probably where you got to start with that. I think that, and I know you mentioned Jaden Higgins, I would say that he's probably, that Burden is above Jaden Higgins and those guys. I think of Burden as more of a, I don't know, late first round, mid to late first rounder. And, that's with the Texas kid, Matthew Golden, the Texas receiver. Yeah. And there's a few others. Ted McMillan is a little bit above those guys. But there's a handful of, mid to late first rounders. And then I think you get to like the Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel and a lot of those other guys on day two. So if you're kind of ranking in that case, I would say that Burden is above those guys. And that's why I think that, I think the Patriots might be able to get a Jaden Higgins at 38 or a Jalen Noel at 38. I don't think that they're going to be able to get, Luther Burden at 38.
Okay, so gut feel, out of these two guys you profiled, sounds like you wouldn't be shocked that one of them's a Patriot. It doesn't feel like you think both will be. And would you be shocked if neither? Like if you're, it's betting for me. If you're betting, you think we get 1 for 2 here, 2 for 2, or over?
I think so. The more likely player to be drafted by the Patriots has to be Armand Membou. I think the Patriots are more likely, if Travis Hunter isn't there, if Abdul Carter isn't there, I think it's more or less a no-brainer to go offensive tackle. Okay. And I think at that point you have a 50-50 shot. It's either Membou or it's Will Campbell. So I think the more likely Patriot is going to be Armand Membou. I think that there's a chance the Patriots somehow, do trade up and, like Luther Burden or something like that. And you get him, again, mid to late first round. I would say somewhere between like 25 and 33, call it. And, they trade up into one of those spots and get a player like Luther Burden. If you're going to ask me if I think I'm going 500 or batting 1,000, I'm going to say I believe I'm going to go 500, and I think they're going to draft Membou.
Okay. I can live with that. 1 out of 2 ain't bad, my friend.